Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a very special event that we're extremely excited about. As you may have heard, this event is spanning several continents, and I want to thank our participants, Dr. Ciara Chambers and filmmaker Louise Denver, for joining us at very late at night and very early in the morning, which is the not quite convenient, but closest to convenient time we could find to accommodate everybody. So thank you. Um, I'm a curator at MediaBurn. We're an independent archive dedicated to sharing and preserving the history of independent, activist, and community-based video. We have been doing these virtual screenings since 2020 and plan to continue them for the foreseeable future. We have a very exciting event tonight showing Streets of Ulster, a documentary that I think you will all find absolutely extraordinary about the troubles in Belfast. Shot in the early 1970s. Before I hand it over to Dr. Ciara Chambers, we are screening Streets of Ulster. It lasts about a little under half an hour. After that, we will come back for the conversation. With that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Ciara Chambers. Ciara?
Thanks, Adam. Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased that we're getting a chance to see this extraordinary film this evening. I've spent a lot of time researching alternative representations of Northern Ireland from the 1930s through to the 1980s, and I can tell you that I've never seen anything as extraordinary as this. Not just in terms of the moment that it captures in history, but also in terms of the technological achievements of the film. So it's a really early example of video. I've spent most of my time looking at small gauge film, 16mm, 8mm. So this is already a technologically really interesting film. So I'm keen to ask Louise about that. But in terms of the history it captures, it is a real snapshot of the chaos of life in the early 70s in that area of Belfast. It's an area I know quite well. I went to school in West Belfast in the 1990s, so a couple of decades later. But I had family living in this area at that time. And certainly, I think what Louise has captured is far more even than people's memories would have extended to at that stage. There's so much richness in the film. It's a very poignant film. It's quite difficult to watch in places, but Louise is a really compassionate and sensitive interviewer, as you'll see. And I think in terms of the fact that material like this is so important to our archive, that you're going to see an example of why we need moving image material that captures these moments that are so chaotic and difficult. Most other filmmakers and journalists, I think, would have been very much in fear of their lives being in the middle of some of these moments of violence. And I think Louise will tell us a little bit about the production context that was so dangerous for her at the time. But also just the fact that these issues are still so pertinent to life in Northern Ireland and its legacy today. And being able to see something that's such an alternative representation of this time and what people were living through is incredibly powerful. So that I hope that you'll find as much value in the film as I have had, and I'm really, really looking forward to talking to Louise more about it afterwards.
Come all you young rebels and list while I sing, for love of one's land is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon, and I'm just gone 16. My home is in Monaghan, there I was weaned. I was thought all my life cruel England to blame, and so I'm a part of the patriot game. 'Tis barely 2 years since I wandered away with the local battalion of the bold IRA. I read of our heroes and wanted the same, to play up my part in the patriot game. They told me how Connolly was shot in the chair, his wounds from the battle all bleeding and bare, his fine body twisted, all battered and lame. They soon made me part of the patriot game. This Ireland of mine has for long been half free. 6 counties are under John Bull's monarchy, and still evil is greatly to blame for shirking his part in the patriot game. I don't mind a bit if I shoot down police. They're lackeys for war, never guardians of peace. But yet at deserters I'm never let aim. Those rebels who sold out the patriot game. And now as I lie with my body all holes, I think of those traitors who bargained and sold. I'm sorry my rifle has not done the same for the quislings who sold out the patriot game.
Yeah.
What was it like?
I was at the front there, you know. Just came floating down, you know. Slow motion, like, you know.
Do you work in the co-op?
No, I work in a corporation in Lardy.
Do you know if there was any warning given?
Well, there was no warning given to us, but apparently the guards in the offices in the building were told about a warning, you know, but they didn't hear any warning, you know.
Probably stood for 469. You sort of took it land down, but now if anything happens, you're not going to take it land down. You're going to kick up hell to get what you want. And if you don't get it one way, well, you don't get it by fair means, you get it by foul means. Well, once that army comes in, you don't give 2 hoots why you're shot or not. You're going to take somebody with you, if it's any way possible at all. And like, what about you come to your hand, you're going to use it. You're not going to worry, are you going to get it yourself? As long as you get some of them, that's it. You're satisfied. If you're shot or you're killed, well, as long as you take somebody with you, you'll die happy.
Mr. Reardon, routine search of houses and gardens. I suggest you keep out of the way.
For shame's sake, they would have said the IRA burned their houses on Bombay Street.
But Mr. Clark said the Republicans burned their own homes.
We said
We burned their own homes, left their
shot
shelter
their
of
own man.
nothing.
Shot their own man. Everything was the IRA, no
Shouldn't
matter
say
what
what the
happened.
IRA
That was the whole thing, the IRA. Never the UVF. They blew up. The mains, the first mains just blew up. They all
68.
walked out in 68 and left people without water. They were all in with my brother when he was doing his 4 months in remand for the guns. It was found in his home to defend the district. But the UVF could do no wrong. That's the government we're on. They're kept up by English law. And it's not, we don't thank them this. Let's talk about direct road. It's just worse, just as bad. While England keeps our forces and keeps ourselves here, there'll never be anything, only bloodshed for the Catholic people.
That's we created a monster. And the monster's turned on.
We only want them out. And we can rule ourselves. We want them out of here, the British, and everything they stand for.
Scotland. Yes. God bless it. For Scotland, the whole road for Scotland to see this. And as I say, if they're so fond of Dublin and so fond of the Free State, why don't they go back and stay there and live in the piggery? For that's all it is.
That's right.
It's only a dirty piggery. And let them, why not go home and stay there and live in their £3.7 allowance for a man and a woman? They'll not get that here because they've got the Queen's money here. They want the half-crown here. They want the crown, but they don't want the half-crown. And as I say, they can't do enough to them.
All Catholics?
Well, the IRA and most of the Catholics is causing the trouble.
Well,
if they want to live, why no live in peace? God's sky is big enough to hold us all, right? It's a great big sky and it's a great big country. If they want to live in peace, let them live in peace. But if not, let them get back to Dublin. And when Dublin's full, fill them in the water. Dump them in the water. That's the only remedy.
Drink a lot of them. Drinking's too good for children.
And then you go with the vanguard because we women's coming out because we see that there's nothing else for it. The murderers can get out of there and get out along Cash and get out of everywhere. We have political prisoners in there that done very, very little. In fact, done nothing compared to the murder that was done. And our men's in there doing 7 years life and never had no evidence against them. So they paid you the bomb, murder and wreck. They've got everything. As Mr. Faulkner said, violence does pay. So now we're not going to have no violence, but we're going to protest and we get our political prisoners out. For it's all one-sided. Mr. Whitelaw's appeasing the Catholics and appeasing the IRA. Well, he'll have to appease the loyalists of Ulster, for we'll never surrender. No surrender.
That's good.
And all our work all gone now. No work to do now. You won't get any work?
No, God knows where. There's no work in the country now with these pigs running about.
Is this the IRA you're talking
Yes,
about?
the IRA.
It really enrages you for to see a building like that going up.
Yeah. They just want to destroy the whole economical structure of the country altogether.
Why do you think they want to?
Well, they want a united Ireland, and they'll never bloody well get it. They'll never get it.
I'm a lobber.
Who burnt it?
All the fellas from Alderson's town. After Bloody Sunday.
Lies!
How long it was?
No, it was the night of Bloody Sunday.
That's Sunday night.
They set it on fire.
It's about 11:30.
What was it?
It was a food.
It was a
supermarket. Lipton's. Half of it was burned at first during internment, and then the other half was burned on the day of Bloody Sunday. The people just couldn't hold it back because they couldn't just stand and let the British soldiers shoot 13 down and nothing happened. And that's why the buildings were burnt, to show our anger that we aren't going to stand by and let the British soldiers run wild whenever they want.
Support the provost?
Yes, I do. We all do. Everybody in this area does.
Except George. I support them.
because some of the attorneys got out. 23 attorneys got out.
How many from round here?
One. Joseph.
How long's he been in?
7 months about.
What's his name?
Joseph Mulhern.
When did you know he got out?
2 o'clock.
Are you really happy?
Yeah.
Where is he then? You happy everybody's lit a bonfire for you?
Oh, indeed, yes. Very good.
You just got out this morning?
Right, 3 o'clock this evening I got out.
When did you hear you were going to get out?
About an hour before, 2 o'clock. So, about 2, they just let you know just before you're released when you're getting out, So it comes as a surprise.
How long were you in?
About 6 months.
What's it like to be back on the Kashmir Road then?
It's great.
We know? Were they down visiting?
Just knew when I was coming in the door, what I was at. So, bit of a surprise.
How are you feeling all the way coming up from Long Cash?
I don't know I'm out. I can't realise where I am yet, So, very surprised. No, I still don't know I'm out, So.
Excited?
Pardon?
Feeling very excited?
Oh, indeed.
How about you?
Oh, it's good to have him home again. It's good to have him home again, yes. Certainly is. Yes, great. But, sometimes I can't believe it. It was so sudden. We didn't expect it, Just walked in. That's it, yes. Didn't they?
How about you? You happy to have your brother home?
Yes.
Yes, I am. Yes, thank you very much.
I love my brother home. I love
Was he shot?
Barrel bullet in the head.
And it gave him concussion? Did it kill him immediately?
I think so.
How old is he?
11.
And you were at school with him, were you?
No, I used to play for the team.
Fell down. They beat him with our battens and that.
He got out of the Saracen?
Yeah, and they beat him after the I'd
Just
fire
from eyewitnesses, you know.
the rubber bullet at him. Well, that's what they call it, the rubber bullet. Wouldn't do it to a dog.
But I don't care who knows it. My son was in the Fianna and he was fighting for his freedom, same as everybody else is fighting for. I don't care who knows it. He was just an Irishman, and I'm proud of him. Only thing that I'm sorry that I've really lost something very dear and very special. He was a very good boy, and he just died fighting for what he believed in.
And play it forward. We want a free Ireland, our country freed, and England to get the hell out of here. That's what we want, and that's what I want, because I have had so much of it. I had my 2 friends shot dead, I had 4 boys blown up in Clonard Street, and my son shot. I have done imprisonment, and I'm also waiting on another sentence. And for my country, I'll do that, if it gets our country freed.
Here's your chance. We're just out of Sarsen net, very second. All the ratters out.
We're going out to fight the British Army again.
I'm coming around. Excuse me. This down.
The Brits must be in.
Yeah. So are you going to stay in for a while?
No, not while there's breath and power in my body. I won't stay in and fight to death.
This is good.
throwing the stones, but I mean, this is provoking. There's just sitting here
just
like
as
this
bad,
all
isn't it?
evening.
Just as bad, isn't it? They may as well be throwing stones backwards. They're just as bad. 1-1 over. The dummy tits of one.
Yeah, houses. Houses are unnecessary. Undercover.
1-1 Roger, that's you. Hello, 1-9, this is 1-1 over. 1-9, I have a priest at my location. Things are quiet. The responsible people have stopped the stone throwing, stopped the bottling. They have it under control. They have asked that we leave the area as soon as possible, as our presence is causing a certain amount of aggravation. Over. They give is 5 to 10 minutes. The reason is that the house has been searched. The occupants are two men who were arrested in connection with an armed robbery on the Springfield Road this morning. The houses are being searched to see if there are any more arms, ammunition in those houses. As soon as those searches are completed, we will leave this area. And we're back. We have done our bit. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, that's you've done it all. Thank you.
We have done our best. Well done,
Where's your mummy?
Now we get you, can't you?
Daily routine here, everyone.
seen her before. Yeah, no.
I'm telling you, they're not allowed into Kashmir Road. We are the people. We've proved ourselves the people and we'll be the people. And we are number one on the 32 counties, no matter about Jacqueline's. We are the people on the Kashmir Road.
Briefly to introduce our participants tonight. Louise Denver was a longtime journalist in the UK and the Middle East before eventually returning to Australia to work as an advocate for sustainable environmental policy and Indigenous rights. Streets of Ulster was her first video. While filming there, she met Global Village's John Riley and Stephen Moore, contributing to their documentary, The Irish Tapes, and eventually joining them in New York City to edit the video. Streets of Ulster won awards and played to great acclaim around the world, including the Edinburgh Film Festival and the Women's Film Festival in New York City, and was broadcast in Germany and the United States. I should say Susan Milano's name has been mentioned a couple of times. She was the co-founder and co-director of the Women's Video Festival, and it is because of Susan that we have a copy of this extraordinary documentary. She held on to it for 50 years, and we were lucky enough to find it in her archive. So thank you, Susan, for well, for everything, but in this particular case, for being such a wonderful archivist. Denver made several more videos after Streets of Ulster, including several community profiles in rural Devon, England, where she relocated after filming this, before devoting herself fully to journalism, largely working as a business reporter for publications including the Wall Street Journal and the Middle East Economic Digest. Our moderator for the evening is Dr. Ciara Chambers, who is a senior lecturer in film and screen media at University College Cork. She's the author of Ireland in the Newsreels and co-editor of Researching Newsreels. She was the scriptwriter and associate producer on Ireland in the Newsreels, a 6-part television series broadcast on TG4 in 2017 through 2019. She is currently working on the Make Film History project in partnership with Kingston University, BBC Archive Editorial, the British Film Institute, Northern Ireland Screen, and the IFI Irish Film Archive. And she was producer of the play Souls, Shadows, and Secrets. Her monograph, Outsider Cinema, Amateur and Independent Filmmaking in Northern Ireland, 1929 to 1989, will be published with Edinburgh University later this year. And with that, Ciara, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Adam. And yes, a huge thank you to Susan for preserving this extraordinary film so that we have it. It strikes such a chord today, Louise. It's just so powerful, quite a visceral experience watching it. Just the chaos that you've captured, the sense of loss, the impact on children, and particularly I find how you've represented women's experiences of the Troubles. It is a stage in history where not a lot of people would be lining up to come to Belfast. So I wondered, how did you find yourself there with the camera at that stage?
Well, my husband, who is unfortunately now dead, David Reedham, is the cameraman on that, and he's the one that really captured a lot of that film. We'd been in Belfast previously, just doing some stills photography for the underground newspaper we worked on out of London called Friends magazine, and it was really I mean, context, 68, 69, 70, we were all changing the world in those days, guys. And what was happening in Northern Ireland and what had happened in 1969. And was it 1969, Ciara, which was
Yeah,
the Bloody
68,
Sunday?
69 would have been the start. Bloody Sunday then was 72.
Yeah, and then what had happened? So the situation in Northern Ireland, as you obviously picked up from those kind of clips from both the Protestant and the Catholic women, was that there are 32 counties in Ireland, and it had been divided into 6 counties in the north ruled by the UK. This went back to the time of King Billy, which was something that we didn't know when we went in there as young, kind of like starry-eyed. Let's get to the heart of this matter. It must be black and white. The Brits are oppressing the underdog, and let's just expose that question. Well, when we got there, we could see that it was just much more complicated than that, as all these things are. And it had a historical basis, the historical basis which Dr. Chambers, I'm sure, will be able to explain much more cleverly than I, was based way back when the British were concerned that the Catholics were going to outbreed them. So they put a pile of landowners in to Northern Ireland to basically keep a feudal system going, really, in which the Catholics were essentially perceived to be the serfs and the landowners were the Protestants, and it perpetuated. And so that perpetuated the system as it moved into, the modern day, where, the work wasn't necessarily digging up potatoes on the farm, but it was actually working in the shipyards in Larne, which were the major employer. And the majority, and the Protestants always got the first task, always got the first jobs, and the Catholics didn't. So there wasn't even one man, one vote at that point. So that was the context historically of the dissatisfaction that blew up into, as you can see, just hatred. And it was, when I went into some of those, we were in Pontius McCart's single end, Cara, in the Kashmir Road itself, just off the Kashmir Road. And it was, it's a single end is just kind of like a one room in the front, dunny out the back, and a one room up the top, with two very small bedrooms. And so it was right there. You could see the wall between the Shankill Road and the Kashmir Road, just out there. And so that's how we got to be able to be part of that community, if you will. And so that was when we made the choice that it was actually to be part of that community that was the only way we were going to capture this vignette, if you will, of that time and of the of what it was like to live in that time, but also why it was so important to capture it. We had to take our tapes to, and you know what, I can't remember the name of the hotel now, Ciara, but you probably can, in where all the international journos were holed up, because they only had 30 seconds, maybe a minute on the news. And we got to know John Lawrence, who was CBS out of the UK, the States, and he thought we were doing a pretty cool job. So he kept our tapes safe, because the British Army raided us many times. They came in the middle of the night wanting us to sort of basically be quislings, if you will, and tell on what was going on. Of course, we refused, but we realized that we were in danger of actually losing those tapes. And perhaps a little story before I shut up. Because of those, the as you could see, the women and the kids were trying to get the Saracens out of the road, because, and they were, and as that priest quite rightly said, they were, the soldiers were just provoking it. They were being told what to do from afar. And so they stayed, whereas they should have withdrawn if they had any, because they were just provoking potential injury and hurt. Well, in filming that, we then were obviously filming a lot of the people involved in that. So one day we were suddenly lifted and thrown into the back of a car with a hood over our heads. And Michael Monaghan, who was an IRA war leader, had us driven down to the border to Dundalk to understand what we were doing and how we were there and why we were there. So, kidnapped by the IRA is another little thing on my CV, if you will. And and we had to sort of talk our way out of what we were doing and explaining why we were doing it, because at the time we were hoping that we would be able to get this video into the BBC and so it could be seen in England so that it might make some sort of impact in terms of policy change. Unfortunately, we didn't, but we did get a bit of a showing, as Adam has mentioned, and cable TV, I think it was Channel 13, also showed it at the time. And so, anyway, in many ways, it captures tragedy.
Yeah, it just captures such an important representation of just what it was like to live at that stage and just how easily violence erupted in the streets and just the terrible loss that people were facing as well. And it is all of those forces coming together, the deeply entrenched attitudes, the inequalities in society, people becoming even more entrenched when they suffered losses throughout the troubles, throughout the violence. But I think from your perspective, you were in so much danger. I mean, being kidnapped by the IRA is not something a lot of people survive. So from that perspective, and then you're also getting raided by the army, you're facing that danger from both sides. Did you have a sense how much danger you were in at that point?
Obviously not. I think I was just, it's what's Bernard Shaw, youth is wasted on the young. Fools where angels fear to tread, I reckon. And look, in many ways, I did feel part of that. I mean, even though I didn't totally obviously understand that story, you could see that it was wrong. And you could, and we were capturing it. And we had the capacity and maybe, at that time, the foolishness to capture it. So it wasn't, you don't tend to think of yourself in a situation like that ever. I mean, that 11-year-old child that was, buried and what does his mother say? That an Irish man fighting for what he believed in. He was 11, and that wee lad who had his legs broken, that his dad was carrying him out of there, and those rubber bullets were, they are solid, they kill. And of course, those soldiers themselves are only kids, many of them anyway, and they just get anxious and nervous and react, and wise heads are not in that world.
And I think you capture that particularly well, just how difficult it was to be in those circumstances and how everything was unraveling. And there's a real sense of, I think you stand back enough to let the camera depict what's happening without in any sense imposing your own viewpoint on it. I think that's what's so powerful about the film, that you're trying your best to capture as much as you can from both communities without laying any judgment on it, which is also something that must be quite difficult, because presumably your views on things maybe changed while you were there, or maybe it was, that you felt at some point you might have wanted to make a commentary on it, but you didn't ultimately. You left us as viewers to make our own mind up about what we saw.
Indeed. And I mean, because those people were speaking for themselves. And, yes, it was, I was more welcomed. We were more welcomed, if you will, in the Kashmir Road than we were in the Shankill, as you can see. But that said, and it was, um, I mean, the anger, that's what kept on striking me, the deep hatred that was there from women who really did want peace. But at the same time, they, because what did the mother of that wee lad say? Four of her boys had been killed. Now her little son, she'd been arrested. You know, these things just build up, and so it just builds up this antipathy and this anger. Um, I can see Susan and I were both long-haired kids sitting down on the floor of Global Village cutting this videotape. And it's Susan that helped me edit this entirely. We caught up last year in New York City, and it was so lovely to see her again. And since we hadn't seen each other for so long. Susan, you've got a hand.
I have a question for you, Louise, because I wanted you to confirm. Mostly it was you and David only together covering in that. You didn't have anybody else. Because
No.
just in the context of having an iPhone here, and there the recording deck weighed 19 pounds, the camera weighed 7 pounds, you were connected together by a cable, so you really didn't have much facility for taking cover or moving or getting around things that might be endangering. And I just wanted to inject that because you're in the middle of it all the time.
That's true. That's true,
Yeah,
Susan.
that's a really important point about just the practicalities of shooting it, of editing it, and then Susan as well of preserving it. That you've preserved it all this time. We wouldn't be able to see it otherwise. So could you say just a little bit more about using that early video format, the editing, whether or not there was anything you wanted to leave out ultimately, or that you couldn't capture? Yeah, just a little bit more on the technical side of things would be really interesting.
It was terribly imprecise. Forget about computers and being able to, stop at the same point, edit point, twice in a row or twice in 100 rows. It was really frustrating in that way. And the other thing was that the technical result, I mean, it looks very primitive, but in many of the tapes that I managed to preserve, they have that in common. They look primitive, but usually what happens is the content is really what comes through. It's not lost, despite the fact that now, everything is always so crisp and perfect and color and everything, the way you want it. So, but saving this was, I just thought that maybe someday we could do something with it again. And then finally in 2016, I learned that we could convert things to digital files. And so that's how that happened. It wasn't really a plan, but it worked out to be worthwhile.
I think the quality is excellent. I think the circumstances of how you were shooting, the chaos that you were in as you were shooting, and the fact that the images are really clear and we are right there. There's an immediacy to them. We are right there in it. And so I think just the framing, the shooting, and the quality of what's being preserved is excellent. And I know there's some colleagues from Northern Ireland Screen's Digital Film Archive on the call here, so I think they will definitely agree. I mean, the powerful sense you have watching it of being transported right into that moment is just, there's something in it that is so different from any other type of broadcast footage or any other representations of that time. And I think a lot of that has to do with, Louise, the fact that you're embedded in those communities and you're trusted to an extent, that you're living there. So you have that sense of being close to the communities. And I don't know if they were asking you, what side are you on? I don't know if that was a case.
Well, I don't think if I had ever indicated that I was on any, I mean, obviously they felt that I was there to represent them. And you know, I was certainly there to capture them. So that was very clear. And I did certainly go in there thinking that the British should have got out of Northern Ireland. I didn't think that the six counties was the whole Irish question has been an absolute Achilles heel in Britain's side, and it remains thus. You guys who know much more than I do about the history of your country can probably testament to that. What was quite interesting in that there was a little clip in there right at the beginning where we put all those pieces together to kind of intro it without any kind of a verbal introduction as to what you were going to see, which was all those pieces with the music underneath. And one of those pieces that you might recall was a training thing with a pile of lads in Derry. That was Martin McGuinness training them, Ciara.
Wow.
And
okay.
yeah, back then. So, I mean, these were all men who either moved up through the ranks of the IRA and then became politicians in their own right to try and resolve the troubles. But that was Derry was very frightening, even more frightening in many ways than we were mobbed in Derry. And because it was felt that because what they could see on their screens, the TV screens, was the British side, because it was BBC that was showing them stuff. So they were being shown the British perspective of their own experience. So when we were in a crowd in Londonderry, that crowd turned on us, and that was pretty scary. That was quite frightening. So we had to run.
And did Martin McGuinness later on in his career know that footage existed?
I don't know. Maybe, probably not, Ciara.
Probably not, I would imagine, because it might have been slightly controversial for him to have been depicted in that way. And I can imagine that there would have been maybe some documentary filmmakers who would have been delighted to get their hands on that footage, but other parts of it as well. So what was it ever reused by anyone else?
Bits of it were used by John Riley in those Irish tapes. Much of the stuff in the Irish tapes is our stuff that he took. There were and from the original Irish tapes that we had, there was a piece that we didn't have in this, which is in the Irish tapes, which is me going down on the coach to Long Kesh. Long Kesh was the concentration camp. They imposed martial law in Northern Ireland, which meant that you could be in prison without trial for 6 months, I think it was. Hence that lad that we had that little interview with who came back. So if and that was quite a poignant conversation, really, because these were mothers or girlfriends or daughters, not sons, in that coach trip down to Long Kesh where they had visiting. And so there were quite a few pieces in the Irish tapes that were bits from the work that we did.
Yeah,
so there was heaps of material, frankly. It was really, really hard to edit it, wasn't it, Susan?
It was, and unfortunately, okay, shouldn't talk about the dead, but they really, at Global Village, they really didn't keep their equipment in good repair. And that was another thing. It was frustrating, but you know, we did the best that we could with what we had and like that. But I'm very, very pleased that this happened and that I was a part of this. I had almost forgotten that, but I remember you were preparing it so we could show it in the Women's Video Festival that year, and it really was a hit. It's such a strong piece. Glad that it survived.
Because I think that's something that wasn't always very well represented, the impact of the Troubles on women's lives and the practicalities of, you know, how you deal with life if your husband is interned. and particularly the sense of injustice if you know that he has not been in any way involved in any of the conflict. But I think also just that notion of there are these missing pieces of history that are so easily lost, and many of the broadcasters were not always all over keeping these fragments that they had shot. So there is a lot of material in relation to Northern Ireland from recent broadcast history that just doesn't exist anymore. And I think now, because we live in the digital era, we forget that precarious, obsolete formats are actually much in need of protection and digitization when appropriate, and that we have to be, be really careful to mind them and to salvage them and to also get them out there to the general public, because this is such an important part of that legacy and that story, and particularly because of its unique perspective that is totally different from the broadcast perspective, which is one of the main versions of that history that exists in terms of audiovisual representation, that it's such an important piece there in order to show this alternative version of what was happening. And I kind of think, Louise, almost it's that notion of your external perspective coming in. It would perhaps have been impossible for someone living there long-term, full-time to come to it with your lack of kind of previous bias or prejudice towards what was happening.
That's true. And it was that. It was a sort of like a it was a discovery piece, really. We went in with a kind of like, oh, it's black and white, to discover that isn't the case whatsoever. And then to realize that you just captured the courage and the conviction and the emotion of what was going on there. Little pieces that we caught. The kids the kids had nicked a Xerox machine from school so that they could make their own newspaper. So, and these were 10 and 11 and 12-year-old kids that were actually rodeoing out a news feed. You could see when all the people were sweeping up the rocks that they'd broken, and how the team just naturally, without even conversation, worked together. Everybody was sweeping, others were picking up, others were carrying in milk crates to kind of store them for ammunition for the next kind of attack on the Saracens. It was just, it grew that community, it strengthened the community. I know it was strengthening them in hatred. But it was also pulling them together in a way that whenever you interview anybody that's had a kind of a wartime experience, you find that even I know, interviewing my father when he was 94, he'd been a pathfinder flying Lancasters when he was 18, and was an acting squadron leader at 22, and he, even though he had a huge life, that period of 2 or 3 years of his life was so powerful in terms of forging how you feel. And I think in the States, so many of you will be from the US there listening. The Vietnam War, it forges those relationships, because you are, has this guy got my back? Are you, where we can have we forge a community, we forge a feeling and a support of each other that you won't get in normal, as we go about our normal lives. So that got caught, I think, in this piece. And interesting also, Ciara, that you talk of the women, because it was the women that when I was over in the States last year, Susan and I was going to pick up an award for a piece of environmental work I've been doing in Washington. Susan had encouraged me to go to the African American Smithsonian there, and it was you know, when you go around the African American Smithsonian, you see that actually how things changed, how people moved forward was entirely through women. That women forged difference, and that's what actually happened in Northern Ireland. The women of Andersontown, one of the suburbs of Belfast, came together and they produced the first female politician, Bernadette Devlin, who went to England, you know, as part of the British Parliament to represent Belfast, because they wanted to find ways to get peace and to move forward from this kind of endemic hatred and fear of each other.
Yes, and Bernadette Devlin was particularly represented in really interesting ways in the media, and I think it became a real invasion on her life. Certainly, the way she was represented and depicted. It's really interesting when you said there that the kids were releasing their alternative newspaper, which I think is extraordinary. I think people did get a sense from within that there were so many misrepresentations in the media, that this was a country that was being seen all across the world in terms of images of violence. And I think one of the other things that we sometimes forget is that there were loads of other kind of cultural movements taking place at the time where people were finding common interests, like, you know, later on punk, for example, and coming together in communities to try, cross communities in particular, in relation to music, to try and find an alternative space to all of the conflict and all of the community building that happened during the conflict. So I think, you know, culture was something that was seen as a sort of a way to find an alternative path, an alternative interest. And I think the other thing, Louise, I know you mentioned earlier before we came on the call about integrated education being something that was a missed opportunity. Had there been more of that, perhaps things wouldn't have gone on so long, that there was just such segregation. And then, as you showed so powerfully, the ongoing sense of violence and loss entrenched those attitudes all the more. But I think also one of the things that comes across so powerfully in Streets of Ulster is the effect on young people that they were, as that woman said, my son is an Irish man, the 11-year-old boy, that they were being forced to grow up very quickly. And instead of maybe engaging in the usual kind of leisure activities that young people might have, they were going out and they were learning how to riot effectively. They were learning how to, you know, to find weapons and to become engaged in the conflict. And I think that that's something that you depicted very powerfully as well, that effect on younger people and how easily it was for them to become embroiled. And you have that sense of it just passing on through the generations.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier, just before we came on as well, about another little clip, which was a couple, Sean and Carol. Sean was, they had met at Queen's University, where Cara also went to university in Belfast. And Sean was Catholic and Carol was Protestant. They fell in love. They were a couple. They eventually joined the Irish Republican Army for various reasons, political reasons, essentially. But when we were in New York editing this material, Susan, John had a line into John Lennon, and John was also very much exploring his own culture and his own relationship with Ireland, came from Liverpool, big Irish influx into Liverpool. And he let us have a B side of a song that he wrote for us called The Luck of the Irish, which goes underneath that Sean and Carol little video. And I'm sorry that I don't know where that is, guys, now, but we certainly secured that. And that was quite special.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, Adam.
Oh no, I'm sorry. We should wrap up fairly soon.
You're right.
But in part, like, we are joined by several people in Ireland, and it's extremely late there. We appreciate your indulgence and whatever tea or coffee you've drank to stay up this late. But I'm wondering if possibly briefly before we go, Louise, there's a special thanks to Jim McCann in the credits, which is a name that I think some of the folks from Ireland might have some vague familiarity with. But he's not the sort of person that you would normally see thanked in a documentary production. But I'm wondering if you could just say,
I'm not sure. And you know, when I saw that, because I forgot about that, I'm not sure why we thank Jim. Jim's a complete and utter crook. You know, there's no question. He was the first guy to break out of Crumlin Road jail. That's a story, I tell you. But not for today, another time. He's a complete psychopath, that man. Eldest of 13 kids out of Belfast. You know, he grew up pulling the wings off flies. You know, this guy sold sort of tainted bully beef, repackaged it back into the UK. He was involved in gun running from Libya to the IRA. He was an absolute crook. And he was a complete, you know, I mean, forgive me, American men and women, but he had the sort of like ego of a Trump. And he just thought that he could do anything. And he did. Well, when he heard that there was a bunch of journos coming over from London, which was us before we did the video, he decided that we would that he'd show us the ropes and take us to places. But it was through Jim that we got I got those contacts, which is how I ended up being able to stay in Pontius Picat or Frankie Card's single end whilst he was in Crumlin Road jail in the Kashmir, and through you know being allowed to, because that obviously had to be cleared, not that we realized that with the IRA at the time. And you know, so that was my innocence, I think, of dedicating it to Jim at the time. He has an extraordinary story.
Yeah, it's a very riveting reading on Wikipedia. One of the more notorious criminals in modern Irish history was there as a tour guide for journalists.
That's it. And we had a guy from Der Spiegel, Felix, out of Germany. We had a Canadian dude over. There was David, there was me, there was Jilly, who was the wife of the of Friends magazine owner and editor. So we were an eclectic bunch, and we kind of got taken in by Jim because he could talk the hind leg off a donkey, and until we all got arrested. But that's another story.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Dr. Ciara Chambers and Louise Denver. This was an extraordinary conversation. Again, this event has been recorded and will be posted to the Media Burn website. You'll get a notification when it's ready. In addition, Streets of Ulster on its own can be viewed for free on mediaburn.org. So can the Irish tapes. Yes, we will be back next month with another virtual talk. Thank you, everyone, so much. And thank you, Susan, too, for joining us.
Thank you, Media Burn, for doing what you do.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Cara. Lovely to meet you.